Good morning, Steve Lavallee here at the Total Mortgage Studio, and I'm welcoming my good friend Paul McKee, who with Keller Williams, the Hatcher Group, and the 2024 Maine Association of Realtors president.
That's correct. How you doing, Steve?
I'm good. I don't like the days getting shorter, but
no.
Here we are in the fall, and it's beautiful. So. What were there one or two things that really surprised you, being the president of the state of Maine Association of Realtors?
Well, I would say yes. I think the first thing being is just dealing with the issues that came about this year. It's kind of a unique year with the National Association of Realtors on March 15th making an announcement about
it seems a long
settlement agreement. Well, I was reminded.
Yeah.
From March 15th to August 17th, which was our deadline to implement the new changes to the real estate industry.
Yeah.
It was 156 days, and I can't remember every day, but I do know I had a lot of meetings about it.
Yeah. Were meetings mostly here? Did Augusta, you said? I think you said you spent a lot of time in Augusta.
I spent a lot of time in Augusta, but a lot of the meetings could be Zoom meetings.
Okay, that's good.
Which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the first surprise, was just that, well, I'll say it really was the second surprise if we're going on a timeline, because on January 8th, which was only 8 days into leadership,
your presidency,
the current president of the National Association of Realtors resigned, which was the second time that happened in a 6-month period.
That's right.
So, she resigned. She was being blackmailed, and we obviously don't know the details, nor do I really care.
Yeah.
She was looking out for her family and their best interest, and so that was the first shock.
So and then are there 50 people? If she was the National Association president, does each state have one vote or whatever? How does that work?
No. So with the National Association of Realtors, you've got all your members get to vote at an election period, but it's planned years in advance. You work your way up just like you do at the state level.
Gotcha.
So yes, I 2024 Maine Association of Realtors president, but I was first vice president, president-elect, president, and then next year I'll be a past president.
So it's really kind of a 4-year commitment.
It really is.
Okay, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Has it affected your business, or I mean?
No, I had a great year last year.
Right.
I'm actually surprisingly having a good year this year.
That's good. Congratulations.
So it's just a juggling act is the biggest surprise.
So you mentioned it, and the monkey in the room for all of us is
where's the monkey?
For the last whatever, it was August 17th, so almost 2 months now, or is 2 months. The NAR settlement on the way. I guess I look at it as the way people selling their home pay commission. Is that what it
so
is?
The first part of all this came about because of Sitzer-Burnett, which was a Missouri lawsuit case where home sellers were complaining that they were paying the buyer agent commission. So that was the basic premise of it.
Yeah.
Now, in the multiple listing service, which we call MLSs,
throughout the national service.
Well, each state's got their own multiple listing service.
Gotcha.
Maine, we're fortunate we only have one, but many states have multiple listing services. Right. So, like Orlando, for example, Massachusetts, they don't just have one multiple listing service.
Got Western Mass and Central.
Yeah, correct. Basically, it's about compensation and cooperation and all that. We're going to still continue with clear cooperation, which is a whole nother subject. But the lawsuit was about sellers paying too much money, paying a buyer agent fee, and
yes, negotiating against them in essence. Is
correct.
Or with
correct. Them. And so they had a lawsuit. It was a jury trial. It was an 8-day trial.
Yeah.
And the interesting part about that is you've got just jurors who don't know. They can't explain what a three-way agreement is. And, three-way agreement is between the National Association of Realtors, your state association, and your local board. And it can get very complicated when we're talking about commission compensation, clear cooperation, and all those things. So bottom line is it was a jury trial in a market where for several years we've had a lack of supply, we've had prices go up, and everyone just thinks that realtors are making all kinds of money, even though unit sales are down and everything else. So end result is bad decision to go to a jury, should have gone to a judge, very complicated subject matter. 8 days of testimony, and the jury didn't ask for one document to review and came back and said, guilty. So, unfortunately, what happens from that is you end up with a bunch of copycat lawsuits. And so there were 19 copycats that were now forming. So the first lawsuit was a $1.7 billion settlement. Gets trebled. So it became $5.3 billion, which no one's going to be able to afford. And so the National Association of Realtors, along with the 19 new copycats, went to the lawyer who had filed the suit, and they all worked out an agreement to pay $418 million to settle.
To whom?
To homeowners of Missouri. And to also not admit any guilt. And wrap up the other 19 lawsuits into this settlement. So on the bright side, when you have a $5 billion verdict, if you're paying $418 million, which no one wants to do, that's really inexpensive when you had 19 other lawsuits facing you as well. So that's kind of what brought us to today and where we are.
So how has it changed business, or has it changed business here in Maine? On my side, I think it has a little bit, but in your opinion?
I mean, I think initially there was a lot of panic. And I think the panic is really what started to change, right? People weren't sure, what do we do? How are we going to deal with this? So these dates are very strong in my mind, March 15th. So I talked to Suzanne Guile, who's our CEO at the Maine Association of Realtors, on that day, and we had a conversation. And the next day, I was on the phone talking to Raylene Estabrook, an agent, and our chairperson of our forms committee. So the big thing is we had to change a lot of our language in our forms. And
because Maine has done a pretty good job before this, right? With buyer brokers agreements.
So you bring up a good point. So, we're one of 17 states in the last, 16 years or more that had buyer agreements that should be in writing. And this whole thing is making sure that the consumer understands who's paying what. And I think in the past, and this is why the lawsuit, is that it wasn't clear. Because a lot of times people would say, oh, well, you don't have to worry about that, the seller's paying. But really, it's the buyer authorizing the seller to pay. So you had to be really clear, and a lot of people probably weren't. So we had written agreements, and that is what everyone should have been doing for the last 16 years in Maine. But we were only one of 17 states that had them. So there's a lot of confusion nationwide. And so these copycat lawsuits, instead of just being a Missouri lawsuit, became national lawsuits. And the lawyer who represented the Missouri, 2 hours after the verdict, went and filed a new lawsuit against the smaller companies and made it nationwide, versus going after the National Association of Realtors and all the large companies and making it state of Missouri. So complicated, but it's also good. It really is good.
That. So let's just use the example of 6%.
No percentages.
Oh, we can't say.
How about that is exactly what the lawsuit's about. So, it doesn't matter, because there was never a standard of, percent that anyone gets. Everything is negotiable, has been, was, and still is negotiable. So if you want to just say X, Y, Z, that's fine.
How about we say 2X?
No.
So X, but a portion, you can still do it, quote, the old-fashioned way, where there's an X, and some of the X goes to the listing broker, and some of the X goes to the buyer's broker.
How about we just make it simple, all right? Whatever payment is happening, whether it's a penny, a dollar, or thousands of dollars, it's supposed to be clear to both parties what's happening now.
Gotcha.
Now the seller doesn't need to know how the buyer's paying. Okay.
Yep.
That's not important. Nor do I need to know what the seller's getting.
Yep.
But my client, so if I'm representing a buyer, my client needs to know exactly how the payments happen.
Right.
And whatever amount that is, it's fine because we negotiated that. It's not a percent.
Yep.
It's just
a dollar amount.
Yes. And same thing on the list side.
Yep.
But in the past, it was the list side was sharing their commission with the buy side.
Yep.
And that was very muddy and unclear. So the good news now is we can make it very clear.
And yes, and again, we're 2 months into it. I've seen it written different ways in the purchase and sale. Is there one correct way, and we'll get there eventually, or can each person, agent, company do it differently?
Yeah, a great question.
Yeah.
And it's a complicated answer. So number one, every agent works for a company. Okay.
Yep.
And that company has a person called a designated broker, DB,
Yep.
who lets them know what their company policy is. So first and foremost, it's important for everyone to understand what their company policy is. Because you may work for a company that says, this is our policy.
Yep.
I may work for a company that says, this is our policy,
Correct.
and they're not the same policy.
I know, that's what
so
we're
there
seeing.
is no one way to deal with it.
All right.
Now, what the state did is we, at the state level, had to change our forms to accommodate all company options that are allowed by law in the state of Maine with the Real Estate Commission. So our forms had to change to allow everything, which also makes it somewhat complicated because people think they have to answer every question when they see it. And it's like, no, what's your company policy?
Yep.
Once you know that, it's pretty easy to fill out the form.
That's the agent. You're saying people.
Yes. So there is no standard way. And yes, you have seen it differently.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of mixed messaging because this was a fast track. I mean, March 15th to August 17th, our industry was turned upside down.
Yep.
And I believe for the better.
Yeah.
Okay. But in that period of time, there was a lot of mixed messaging as we're trying to figure it out. Yeah. So that's why you see a lot of different options.
Yeah. And this will be maybe my final question, and without getting into the weeds, is it supposed to be in paragraph 26 of the purchase and sale or not?
No. I mean, first off, most realtors, and there are some realtors that are probably lawyers, but most of us are not lawyers.
Yep.
So once we start writing in any paragraph, I don't care what number it is, okay, we're practicing law, so we shouldn't be writing sentences, number one.
Okay.
So unless you're a lawyer. So you should have a lawyer like that for you, and then you cut and paste and drop it in. But your DB may say, hey, put this in. Well, that becomes their liability for their company. So if there is a future lawsuit, then they will be held accountable for those actions. So the best thing is, number one, don't write, fill in the blanks that we have in our purchase and sale agreement.
Okay.
And we also have addendums that people can use about compensation.
Yep. That's somewhat understandable. But as a mortgage person, and we need to fill in numbers as well, and we've been regulated, in my opinion, more closely than the realtors have the last couple of years.
Yep.
Where do we find out if our client, the buyer, has to pay a commission?
Well,
in a consistent manner.
That's a good question.
There isn't, in my opinion, and I think it's all going to work itself out. But right now, we're not seeing a consistent.
I spoke. I think it was about a month and a half ago. I spoke to the Maine Association of Mortgage Professionals, and we did a little Q&A. And one of the questions, and I wish I had the answer then, and I was driving home, and I'm like, oh, this is the answer. But like, what can we do? What can you as lenders do to make sure you know exactly who's getting what? And the best question you can ask when you get a purchase and sale agreement is there anything I need to know about compensation from you the agent
Great.
that affects this contract.
Do you want me to ask that question to the client, the buyer, or
No,
to the
well,
broker?
you should
Yeah.
ask both.
Okay, great.
Make sure that they're both clear
Yep.
and on the same
And
page.
are you thinking that it's going to be on addendums for the most part versus P&S?
Well, I've been doing this 21 years, and I've been using written agreements for 21 years, not 16.
Yeah.
And a lot of agents, unfortunately, sometimes haven't used the agreements.
Yes.
They've been given client level services to customers.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So let's, but the key to all of it is there are many ways you can deal with it. You can deal with it in Section 26. If you've had your company, maybe get a lawyer to say, here's standard
wording,
language
standard,
you could do. But we have forms for it, whether it's an agency to agency compensation, or it's a seller directly to the buyer, or it's seller to a buyer agent.
Gotcha.
But there are forms for that. And those are the forms that should be used.
Okay.
But if I have an agreement with my client, which I do before I go out the door,
Yep.
so I already know how I'm being paid. I don't care what the listing agent is offering.
Yep.
I know how I'm being paid before I show property.
Yep.
So if there's a discrepancy between what a seller might give a buyer or buyer agent, then when I'm dealing with you on a loan, when I send you my contract, I can also send you my buyer agreement.
Yep.
And that should all be spelled up front on day one when you receive everything. So the problem is, as a lender, you don't get that because not all agents operate that way.
Correct.
And I see your frustration with it, and I hear it, but it's our responsibility as agents to give that to you.
In your opinion, is it supposed to be a dollar amount or a percent?
It could be either or.
It can be a percent.
Because it could be a flat. It could be a flat fee.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I get blank to
help you buy a house.
Help you buy a home.
And close on a home. Okay,
Right.
great. I know it's going to evolve and stuff, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. Thanks for the update. So I have lived in Cumberland County for 30 some odd years.
Yes, too long. You haven't moved.
No, I'm not helping the market.
Us realtors do not appreciate you.
Correct. I moved, I was in York County when I moved up a couple years before that. I went to Lubec the last couple of summers. We go to Baxter State Park. I travel the state, but I don't know real estate in the whole state. Is there a big difference in your, after your year of representing the state,
traveling
from
the
southern
state?
Maine, northern Maine, east, west? What have you seen?
There is a difference, and but one thing that's not different is our license law, our rules, and our regulations.
Yeah.
So statewide, that is all the same, but how areas operate is different. And if you look at, for example, we could pick on Cumberland and York County, which I work in, most populated. 40% of our population is in those two counties, and then we have 14 other counties, right?
Yeah.
So it is different because, good example is we do open houses in those two counties typically on a Saturday or Sunday.
Yep.
A lot of the state, they don't really do open houses.
Really?
Yeah. So why? I don't know, but it's their choice, right? And that's how they've practiced business.
They don't do them at all? I know they do them, but you're saying Saturday and Sunday down here. But
the majority of agents really don't like to do them in different parts of the state.
Wow, that's interesting.
And just like in different parts of the state, there's not as many condos as there are in southern Maine.
Yep.
I'm not saying there aren't condos, up the coast and everything, but it's not a big part of their business. And some people aren't as familiar with something like, for example, a condo addendum.
Yeah.
And they're like, I haven't done one of these in years, So it's just, it's different throughout the state. And here's what I don't do. I don't usually deal with, large tracts of land.
Yeah.
Right? Because in my area, we don't really have it. So in other parts of the state, that is a big part of their business.
That is, you're right.
Or mobile homes might be.
Yep.
And so we do have, different needs throughout the state because we are one of those states that's very rural.
So where are we? Where's the market right now in Maine and nationally, in your opinion? Not in your opinion, but
So
I guess.
One thing that is the same both, and that is we don't have the supply of homes nationwide or statewide that we need for our housing needs.
So the inventory is still down. It's
Yes.
Is it increasing? I mean, that's the way I feel.
The new numbers will be out next week. Okay. Stay tuned. And I know them. But what I will say is this. We've had, I think I was looking at it today, 9 months in a row where our active listings have risen, which is good.
Yeah, very good.
We need that.
Yeah.
You know, the more housing supply we actually have, the better off the competition, the price appreciation can go down.
Yep.
Because we can't continue to have price appreciation.
I was going to ask you.
Past 4% for several years before we see another problem like we saw in 7, 8, 9.
Yep.
Right?
I agree.
So the good thing is more homes on the market will help slow down price appreciation. But what we're seeing both nationwide and in Maine is a rise of inventory and prices slowing down a bit, which is good.
Yep. Still increasing, at least in Maine, right?
Yeah, and every month is different.
Yeah.
So we could go back and say, this coming month, for example, say unit sales are up 5 point something percent, right? And then prices up 8 point something percent. But last month, it wasn't the same number.
Right.
The thing is, the numbers need to be sustainable. And what we've had is, I don't remember the last month. It was years ago when we had a price depreciation from the previous month.
No, I haven't.
It's been years.
Think it's slowing.
It's actually been years.
Is Maine different? Southern Maine, I just read by now, it must have been September numbers, that Greater Portland's still increasing 5%, 7%, depending on what you're seeing. But I don't know Northern Maine. I don't know.
Yeah. The new numbers will be out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just say to this, 8 of the counties will be up and 8 will be down.
Okay. Right? So that's new.
But the statewide median sale price will be up.
Will be up. Yeah. And how about days on the market?
That's going up a little bit.
Yeah.
But I will say Maine has been hovering for many months with a 3.2 month supply of homes. So even though we've seen listings go up, because of supply and demand, we haven't increased our, average days on market enough, or supply, what's the supply, 3.2 months. It's been stuck there for a while.
Yeah.
So, all right, a balance.
What's it?
Yeah, that's
10 months is a healthy number?
No,
what's the number?
No, so that's a great question. So 6 months is the balanced market.
Okay.
If you've got a 6 month supply of homes, then, and that's based on an absorption rate. Okay.
Yep.
It's like how many actives and pendings divided by, your
available.
Right. And then, it's like how many months supply? What will it take to get through the supply in your town?
Yep.
So if we do 10 sales a month and we got 30 active listings, we got a 3 month supply in a town.
Yep.
That's simple, right? So a balanced market, 6 month supply.
Okay.
We have not seen that in years.
Yeah, in years.
In years. So I'd have to go back and do some research to find that how long that's been. But balance means it's good for both parties at that moment.
Right.
When you have a 7 month supply, we have shifted to a buyer's market.
Yep.
But we have been in a seller's market so long, and since we're only at 3.2 and whatever the new number will be, I can tell you it will be below 4.
Yeah.
It's still a strong seller's market.
Yep.
And I don't know when that's going to end, because we have another problem that happens. When anyone comes along with a good idea or something that could be workforce affordable, then we run into another issue that we haven't really had, and that's NIMBYism. Not in my backyard.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Contingent?
In a month.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were they contingent on the sale of a Maine home or out-of-state home?
Both were Maine homes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right. Well, I think we've gone through our allotted time, but there's so much we could talk about.
Oh my God,
Let's do it again. But thanks so much for coming up. You must have learned a ton or experience.
I think number one was, of course, the first announcement.
Yeah.
And then the second was the big one.
Yeah.
But, if there was a third thing, it's like, that knowledge that you gain, having to have so many meetings. You do learn a lot.
You do learn a lot.
it's funny because I run into realtors all the time, and just for fun, sometimes I ask a question that I know they probably won't have the answer to.
Yeah.
So one of the great things about, being in leadership is not just the friendships that you make and the people that you meet throughout the state, but what you learn, right? And that's actually great for our clients.
It's right. It's, you might have been too busy to maybe lost a client or two over the year because you couldn't get back to them right away, but you're certainly going to gain all that back, I would think, with your knowledge and with you've been out and been the face of the industry for a year. So thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah.
We'll do it again, but
glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Enjoy. Have a great day.
Thank you.